Today's episode is brought to you by ECC Frames. After 40 years in the framing business, ECC Frames has gotten into the custom business to market their services to all geeks. Framing comic books, trading cards, movie posters, record albums, gaming cartridges, action figures, and even models with quality and durability. Whether you're talking about frames or cubes, they use fine, durable Italian wood in their framing. UV-resilient acrylic and acid-free black mat board around the collectible. They also have different colors in frames and mat boards and can work with you to customize the look of your frame or cube to make an artful presentation you'll be proud to present in your geek cave. ECC did a great job for me preserving my original Spider-Man comic strips. I've talked about it before, written by Stan Lee, drawn by Larry Lieber. They can do it for you at very reasonable rates. Think about it. You've probably spent hundreds or even thousands of dollars on a toy, a trading card, a comic book, or some vintage collectible. Don't you want to present and protect it from damaging sunlight and wear? Go to ECCFrames.com, see their work online, contact them about making a customized frame or cube for your collectible. Use the promo code WordBalloon for an additional savings on your order. Again, that's ECCFrames.com with the promo code WordBalloon. And now, on to the show. Hi, everybody. Time again for another Word Balloon comic book conversation. John Suntress here. We've got Nick Spencer with us today to talk about the Secret Empire event coming this summer from Marvel. You know what's been going on ever since Captain America has uttered Hail Hydra and upset half of the internet. Cap is secretly evil, and we've been seeing his machinations in Steve Rogers' Captain America and other books in the Marvel Universe that have a different perspective when you know that in the back of his mind, Captain America is plotting against the heroes of the Marvel Universe and plotting a very grand scheme. It's going to all come out in Secret Empire. I think it's been a very entertaining story. I love when something different like this and extreme happens. And as I've said before, what do you do when the most trusted man in the Marvel Universe becomes its biggest enemy? That sounds like a cool story. So I'm in. Great conversation with Nick Spencer to share with you on today's Word Balloon. Word Balloon is brought to you by In-Stock Trades at InStockTrades.com. There are tremendous deals going on some amazing books at InStockTrades.com. One of my favorite Justice Society stories from James Robinson and Paul Smith, The Golden Age, has been re-released in a deluxe hardcover edition. It is 50% off at InStockTrades.com, just $17.49. Tremendous post-World War II story about the Justice Society. You can also get Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu. The third volume of the omnibus with the Mike Zeck cover is available. Doug Munch, tremendous work on that book. So many great artists on that book as well. 42% off for this giant omnibus, $72.50. There's Deadly Class, Volume 5, Carousel, which I believe wraps up the first season of Deadly Class. Great book from Wesley Craig and, of course, Rick Remender. 42% off. It's just $8.69. Some of the great deals that are going on now at InStockTrades.com. Go to the website, find the great deals and great prices. Remember, if your orders are $50 or more, you receive free shipping from InStockTrades.com. Word Balloon is also brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners. Thank you very much, League, for your support. As you know, I am between jobs right now. I would love to make Word Balloon a full-time position that I can give you new shows a lot more frequently and keep having these wonderful conversations with the people of pop culture. But to do that, I could certainly use your help. If you can afford it, would you consider subscribing to Word Balloon via Patreon? If you go to patreon.com/wordballoon, that's where my subscription page is. Is Word Balloon worth the price of a comic book a month to you? I think I give you a lot of entertainment that certainly lasts a lot longer than reading a single comic book. And we have wonderful conversations with your favorite creative people in the pop culture circles. Consider it if you would. You can either go to wordballoon.com and click on the Patreon ad there. That will take you to my webpage. Or you can go to patreon.com/wordballoon to subscribe directly. But again, I keep getting new people subscribing every week. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much, League of Word Balloon listeners. Without further ado, let's pick up our conversation with Nick Spencer. Great conversation about Captain America. What could be going on in the mind of Steve Rogers? Well, Nick gives us a glimpse in this conversation now on Word Balloon. All right, he's been spending for the last 6-8 months or so breaking the internet and upsetting people with his Captain America stories. But I am a fan, and I guess it comes to fruition this summer with a big Marvel event where Captain America. It's finally going to happen. He is going to be the bad guy. Nick Spencer joins us to discuss the Secret Empire event. It's always a pleasure, Nick.
Well, I am loved by millions.
Hey man, you had me at day one.
Thanks.
You had me, with the premise, because again, it's fun to see. I just had Tom Taylor on, and we were talking about Injustice, and really at a time when there were all these lousy, frankly, DC stories. Here's this crazy idea of, hey, what if Superman were to declare martial law?
Right.
And just go nuts. And this is even more devious because on the surface, God, we've been seeing it happen. Even though, Hail Hydra happened, I forget now, was Secret Wars, was Civil War II. This was before Civil War.
The Hail Hydra moment happened right before Civil War II. Civil War II, I think, came out the next week or so. It was all there in May that everything launched, and obviously it was a couple months later that we tied into Civil War II. But it all kind of hit there in that early start of summer.
Okay. Well, and also you had your mini event, Avengers Standoff.
Avengers Standoff, happened in March and April. So.
Yep, and that's really the genesis, and to bring people up to date, and you fill in the blanks. A sentient cosmic cube has found herself under the control of the Red Skull, and this is when Steve was still an old man.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds ridiculous when you say it like that, but we actually did, lay our groundwork here. It was the plan all through Standoff. It's why Standoff existed in the first place. That was originally the anniversary issue, the 75th anniversary issue of Captain America, and Tom came to me and said, we're looking at doing something in the spring. As an Avengers family event, we haven't really done one of those before, and they had done Black Vortex with the Guardians and X-Men books the year before, so they were kind of looking for something in that format. And I was like, well, if you're going to give me more pages, I'll take them. So we ended up building it out into Standoff, and Standoff was a lot of fun. And one of the things I like about it is it still can be read on its own and enjoyed on its own. If you never paid any attention to the Hydra Cap stuff, you would still get a full and complete story there. But all the groundwork was laid between the early issues of Sam Wilson Cap and Avengers Standoff. We definitely had the plan all throughout and brought it to fruition there, and that led us to Steve Rogers' Captain America #1 there at the start of May. And the big Hail Hydra reveal.
Yeah, and that set everyone off. Holy shit, what's going on?
Well,
Cap is a Hydra agent and had been all along, and it sounded so, how dare you, and everyone was just up in arms, and it's, again, forgive me, but, I grew up with those DC imaginary stories, and granted they had the imaginary story, quotations, but Batman grows up as a criminal, and he's shooting Superman, and, Lex Luthor kills Superman, and Superman's evil, and it's just like, all right, it's just a story, and I'm sure there's going to be an explanation, and, fine, it sounds convoluted when you say the sentient cosmic cube in rejuvenating Cap has rebuilt him from literally the ground up, not just internally and physically, but we've been getting in Steve Rogers' Captain America this really fun alternative, almost like Superman Red Sun, where, here's this parallel story of, this manipulated by time Steve Rogers, who, I loved from the start when, I assume that's the Red Skull's daughter that shows up and meets Steve Rogers' mom and says, hey, we've got this community organization. right during the Depression that might help people like you. It's called Hydra.
It is not the Red Skull's daughter. Lots of folks had that as a theory, and I love that theory. And I get it because it's Eliza Sinclair, and so people heard the sin in it. And
sure,
that's good job, Internet. But no, she's a different character, and you'll be spending some more time with her here in Steve Rogers' Captain America 13. I want to say is all about 13 or 14.
Okay.
You'll be spending a little more time with her, and you'll see a lot more familiar faces kind of align themselves with her. It's one of my favorite issues of the run. But going back to what you were saying before, I mean, in terms of the audience response, and I know we talked about this a little bit last time, but what you learn is people really do want to be taken for the ride, and you learn. That you have to take the outrage and the horror, for what it is, which is that they're on the roller coaster, and they're coming up on they're coming up on the part where they're going to go upside down, and so they're screaming. And if you ask people what they think of a roller coaster at that moment, they're going to tell you that they do not like it at all, and that they wish that they weren't on it. And, when they get off, they'll be like, oh, that was so much fun. Let's do that again.
Sure.
But when you're at that part of the story, you genuinely learn. Like it's such a tricky thing because at times, you'll have people really lose their minds and say awful stuff to you. And, you'll want to spend a year's worth of therapy bills trying to work through some of the abuse that you get. But, what you really learn is your alternative to that is everybody looking at your story and saying, I'm sure it'll be fine. And that would actually be so much worse. That this is just a necessary evil to this kind of story that people are going to say, look, nothing makes me happier than when I read people saying things like, I don't see how they'll ever fix this. That is the idea. When Houdini is like in the trap, you are there to see Houdini get out of the trap. If you thought that he could do it, when they set it up, you wouldn't be interested.
Absolutely.
It is.
Yeah, no, slide ahead.
Yeah, it's all about making the reader believe it. We more than succeeded. I was, as a kid, I was a huge fan of War of the Worlds and, the whole Orson Welles story.
Orson Welles.
Yeah, the whole Orson Welles story about, doing the radio broadcast and everybody losing their minds and people being out in the streets. And, for most of my life, I would still look at that and say, like, how did that happen? Like, people could turn over to another station and hear nothing. People could look out their window and see that, no, chaos hadn't broken out. But they did because people like being swept up in stories. Even when they won't admit it, they want to believe them. So this has been really instructive for me, in kind of rediscovering that's really part of the job. And I think we were really successful on that front, even at times when folks think that, we're kind of overwhelmed by the blowback or negative feedback or what have you. Look, we've done a horrible thing to Steve Rogers. We've done a horrible thing to people's favorite character. It's okay to look at this part of the story and say that's awful. That's so bad. I can't believe that they would do that. That is, you go through the history of Marvel. And, the most memorable stories, the stories that everybody talks about are the stories that got the angriest letters. It's just the reality of it that, Chris Claremont and John Byrne, after the death of Jean Grey, could not open envelopes. The feedback was so brutal.
Michelini and Layton after Demon in a Bottle with
exactly. I mean, it's just over and over. You see that the stories that we all still talk about, the stories that we all still remember, they are the ones that got the most ferocious feedback. To hear people say it now, The Winter Soldier and the Return of Bucky was instantly received as the most loved Captain America story of all time, and as a fan. Who paid a lot of attention to this stuff at that time and was starting to work on his first pitches and everything. I can promise you that was not the case. That when
I have the word balloon evidence, much like our conversations, my conversations with Ed Brubaker, and even Ed kind of allowing a little more peek around the curtain and stuff, going, don't worry, this is all heading somewhere. And he even mentioned Joe Simon back then playing along, it's a sad day to see Steve Rogers go. 90-year-old Joe Simon.
Exactly.
It's like, why not?
I mean, that, and I can remember when Bucky was brought back, the internet thought that was absolute sacrilege, that was the most unthinkable, worst idea they'd ever heard for the character. And you would get these folks who, would write pages worth of why this was the worst idea. Now we almost universally regard it as one of the best ideas, that a cap writer ever had. And that's not to make comparisons or whatever to those stories, but all I can say is this is the constant. The constant is that the stories that get this kind of initial response tend to be the stories that we remember the most. And you can only, when you're in it, all you can really do is try to execute on your game plan, try to tell the story that you set out to tell, try to block out the noise, and continue like it's business as usual. And that's certainly what we've tried to do. There's been practically nothing about this story that has changed from the minute that it was pitched way back in January and February of 2015. I'm consistently amazed. I can go back to those emails and see that the DNA is really intact, that the chain of events is really intact. So and I give a lot of credit to Marvel on that front. And we're seeing it through. And now as we kind of get into Secret Empire, we're really, at that kind of, in that kind of red zone offense. We're kind of in that, in that closing stage. So, it's been a pretty massive undertaking. Certainly at Marvel, I don't think I've done anything that's, had this long in terms of setup and delivery. And so to kind of be where I am now, which is, writing the Secret Empire scripts and, starting to see, the end of the tunnel on that, it's pretty incredible to have gotten this far with it, because it's an insane idea. Really.
Sure.
I mean, you talked about Red Sun, and Red Sun is one of my favorite stories. But one of the things that I said to Tom, at the outset was, there are lots of stories like this in comics, but there are always alternate reality stories. That there are always Elseworlds or what ifs or whatever, and or alternate timelines and futures, that kind of thing. And I was like, what if we just did it? What if we did one of those stories, in the actual canon Marvel universe? And that's why I think it's still one of the more ambitious Marvel stories that I've seen or been a part of. Is that really we did kind of approach this with caution thrown to the wind a little more, and kind of a willingness to go farther than we had in the past. And I'm pretty proud of that.
That's cool. Like I said, I've enjoyed reading this alternate history of Steve's life, because of what's her name again? The cosmic
Kobik.
Cosmic cube. Kobik, thank you. And again, introduced in Avengers Standoff, I believe.
Yeah.
And so no, it's great, and I mean, I want you to catch people up as much as you feel you want to. I'm caught up. I've read Steve Rogers' Captain America up to 11. Sure. So on the Steve Rogers side, there were things at the start of the story. Again, some of the moves that Steve made, where you're like, what the hell is going on? Not only from a Hail Hydra standpoint, but also people that he seemed to want to get out of the way are now seemingly his allies. And a big part of that, too, is Baron Zemo.
Yeah.
So, what can you tell us about Steve and Baron Zemo's past and current relationship?
Well, one of the big influences for me when I was putting this together was House of Cards, and particularly the season of House of Cards where Frank is kind of climbing his way to the presidency. What I really liked about the structure of that story is the viewer is very much in the dark about why the various things that Frank Underwood is doing at the time are, why they matter or how they're connected. And how they all play off of each other. And you keep seeing him do these little things. The visible one is obviously the knocking on the desk. You keep seeing them repeated, and you keep kind of revisiting these seemingly unconnected threads. And you're watching all of them develop seemingly separate, and then you see them all kind of come together and coalesce, and you're horrified as you kind of watch how this guy has manipulated everyone. And you knew he was up to no good, but you didn't fully understand the scope and scale of what he was trying to pull off as he's trying to pull it off. And so structurally I took some cues from that. And, so it was a funny thing to kind of have those first issues of, and particularly the second arc of the Steve Cap book come out, because you have people just saying like, what? So there's aliens now? What's this got to do with anything? Or the Red Skulls in Sokovia. What's the deal with that? And now, as we're getting a little deeper, people are just beginning to see, how it all kind of ties together. Zemo has always been a really major component of this story, and talking about the alternate timeline, that's really been my favorite stuff to write in all this. It's been a lot of fun to just kind of imagine this awful.
What would be different? Yeah, what would be different? But still, and forgive me for interrupting you, but yeah, literally, what would be different in Steve's life, but still get him to the super soldier level? And some of the choices you've made and the replacements of people due to this more evil bent than the original.
Yeah, I mean, almost everybody had like a really convenient inverted figure, and in Zemo's case, he really is kind of an inverted Bucky. And I felt like that was really consistent with how the character has been shown. The character has always sort of sought Steve's approval, even when he's trying to kill him. There's kind of an obsessive quality to Zemo when it comes to both Steve and his father. To me it says, that there's something besides hatred here, that there's, kind of a desire to be understood by somebody, a desire to connect with somebody. And so, when it was time to think about, who would be populating, Hydra Steve's world, and who would be the sort of, Black Mirror version of these characters, Zemo and Bucky were pretty obvious. That you could see that if things played out differently, Steve and Zemo would be absolute best friends and be inseparable. And So, and what you see in the Zemo issue, when Steve confronts him with all this, and Steve kind of goes back through, Zemo's actual continuity, his actual history, Zemo is willing to believe this, that he's hit a low enough point and he's been through enough and he's sort of aimless. And, this guy who has been, a figure of obsession for him his entire life and who he's kind of subconsciously always been seeking the approval of is now standing there saying, you're my best friend. I can't do this without you. And it's kind of everything the guy has been waiting to hear. If you go back to the Brubaker run, and when Zemo pops up, his whole thing is he's furious at Bucky for wearing that costume. He's furious at Bucky for getting a second chance. And it's between the lines, but it's really all about he's angry that this guy has Steve's approval despite the awful things that he's done. And, so to me, that just made it incredibly obvious that if Steve stood in front of him and said, everything you believe is a lie, your father loved you, I love you, we're your family, he would definitely take that deal. That he's never been a guy who's great at attaching to reality. He's always been a little out of place and frustrated and angry about that. His issues with his father are tortured. And, if you read stuff like Born Better, like him confronting his family and his past, are a big part of who the character is. And,
was Born Better a Thunderbolts?
Born Better was a Thunderbolts series that Fabian did. Cool. That kind of it had Zemo going through time and kind of meeting different parts of the Zemo dynasty, and it's really great. And
I'm gonna have to look that up on Marvel Unlimited.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
And it is really fantastic, and it's one of those books that you kind of go back to. It's kind of that and Under Siege and the early Thunderbolts issues are kind of things that I go back to kind of make sure that I'm getting Zemo right as a character. For me, Under Siege is the formative Zemo story. That's really where I came to the character and where he became a favorite for me. So I'll always have a little bit of that, stalkery Zemo as my guy. But in that, Zemo kind of confronts the fact that his father was actually a really bad guy. And kind of gets some closure on that. But the reality is, especially when it comes to parent issues and daddy issues, very few people will ever hit a moment where they're like, well, I've cracked that. I've solved that puzzle.
It's Miller time. Right. Exactly. That's psychosis.
I'm really cool with my awful parent now. That's not usually something that sticks. Sometimes we have those moments of clarity, and then I think everybody's familiar with you have that moment of clarity where you're like, I've made some peace with this, and then a couple of years later you're like, nope, it's still rolling around in my head. And I think that for Zemo, he spent most of his life trying to defend his father's legacy and trying to believe that his father was this hero and was a good guy, and and that Steve was the villain. And then he ends up kind of transferring a lot of those feelings to Steve. And so, to me, Steve walking into the room at this guy's lowest point in his life and saying, guess what? You win on both fronts. Your dad was great and he loved you. I'm great and I love you. So let's go take over the world. And that's the other thing, is on top of everything, he's like, also, now I'd like to help you with everything that you ever wanted to do. So, I was hard-pressed to see how Zemo would even hesitate for a second in that situation. And, but again, that's another one of those moments where, that was in the initial pitch for all this. And so to finally have gotten it and gotten to write it and gotten it out there, it's sometimes when you hold on to these stories for so long, and I encountered this with like Morning Glories on the creator owned site too, that you had this idea years ago and finally, you'll get to write it. And, finally you'll see it drawn and there's just this like sense of relief, like you've been carrying something on your back, for ages. And, so to see all that coming out and see people responding to it and see the Zemo fans by and large and the Thunderbolts fans by and large seeming to dig it, that's pretty cool.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Now, how much, and it's funny because we didn't know or I didn't know at the time, but when we were talking about Avengers Standoff, I would talk about what Brian had planned for Civil War II. Was Avengers Standoff a prelude to Civil War II? Now that I understand the clarity of that you were telling, obviously, a separate story, events of Civil War II certainly are dovetailing into Secret Empire because Maria Hill's fall, the collateral damage that Captain Marvel has to face from her actions and stuff, did that make it easier? Whatever would have been happening in the Marvel Universe? I'm sure Brian was probably pitching Civil War II maybe at the same time that you were pitching this
Pretty
story.
much.
How much of, tell me how much Brian's story helped, or, was it like, oh, great, this is going to fit in great, or did you have to rework things to kind of,
it was,
have those players?
It was a huge help to me. I couldn't really believe, when it all came out, I couldn't believe how lucky I'd gotten, that it was the perfect story to come before all this and to come during all this. Because, if I'm wanting to tell a story where all the heroes, are divided and distracted and, in a bad place, and that helps empower Steve to realize his goals. Civil War II was just this huge gift that got put in front of me where, suddenly there were, characters like Carol and Tony that were going to be in, these really bad, rough spaces coming out of it. For me, I couldn't have asked for anything better and when I did The Oath, when I did the Civil War II epilogue, that was as soon as Civil War II was on the table, and as soon as word of it got to me, I immediately asked Tom to write the epilogue because I knew right away that that the two stories could help each other and could serve each other, and in our Civil War II tie-ins, we got to do a lot of really fun stuff with Steve pulling strings behind the scenes and how he plays a hand and what happens to Banner, and how he's kind of in the background of a lot of scenes, manipulating things. For me, it was absolutely the best thing that could come. And I think for Brian, he got to do things like the Miles Morales and Cap vision, where if you're reading Cap, you understand why Miles might be in that spot in that moment. And we got to both build a lot out of that moment. So yeah, it's just if there had been an event last year that had a really unambiguously happy ending and all the heroes like got together and worked together and came out of it feeling good, I still could have done it, but I would have had to do some extra work of making people believe that these heroes are in fact divided and at a lower point again. And as a result of Civil War II, I had so much of that work done for me, and not just done for me, but it all lined up so perfectly in terms of things like especially where like Carol Danvers is at this point, and the kinds of things that she's undertaking now with the Planetary Defense Shield. That's so in line with how Carol has been depicted and shown in Civil War II. That if the one story hadn't come before the other, it might have stretched credulity, but because you just seen Carol go through this same kind of thing, you understand that that's who she is right now, and that's what she's trying to do. And so I got incredibly lucky, and Brian was very helpful and gave me a lot of great stuff to work with, and gave me a lot of room to play with, both in my tie-ins and in the epilogue, and so yeah, that was really just the stars aligning the right way. It didn't force me to change much at all. There were things about my story that I was maybe going to do in the first 4, 5, 6 issues that then became things that were second arc things, but that was a more than acceptable price to pay. That was a screaming deal to get to do the stuff that we got to do with our Civil War II tie-ins. And when you are launching a new book and it's apparent that you got to start tying into an event that early on in your run at issue 4, issue 5, that can create a lot of nerves. That you can definitely be in a spot where you're like just getting your story started and you tie into something too quickly and your tie-ins don't have the juice, and your book kind of wanders and wastes time. Thankfully, it just lined up just enough to where we kind of got through issue 4 and we were able to go all in on Civil War II. And honestly, when the Civil War II tie-ins hit, that was really when I felt like the audience started to respond. When they really started to get that this story is about nobody knowing what's happened to Steve and what he can do and how he can manipulate that trust that they have in him. The Civil War II issues were really where people could start to see that, that Iron Man trusted him completely and Captain Marvel trusted him completely, and it really bit them. That's when I saw a lot of people who were kind of on the fence really get on board. So it was a huge help for us.
Well, it added a level of meta subtext to Brian's story that only existed if you knew what was happening in your story. Because if you're just reading Civil War 1 through 8, Cap's being Cap. Yeah. And that great moment when he and Miles Morales, are there in front of was it the Capitol? I know it was in D.C. or whatever on the steps. And it's just like, hey, look, it's friendly.
Well, and Brian,
America's
Brian did such a great job with those scenes. When Steve pops up in books, and thankfully this has been really rare, but you're always cautioning whoever's writing them to not have him act really differently. And I would always just joke with people, don't have him say like, well, maybe people should die or something like that. That like he's Steve Rogers. He's capable of going deep cover. Like he's a smart guy. Right. He's not going to tip his hand. It's not with Superior Spider-Man. Part of the fun was like, he was suddenly just acting incredibly different. And that was a fun thing to force all the other characters to respond to. But this is a character who doesn't ever want to be caught. He wants you to believe that he's the same guy that he's always been. And so he should give you inspiring speeches. And he should be the leader that everybody looks up to still. And, the best scenes are when you can have your cake and eat it too on that front, where he can give you a really inspiring speech. But then if you really look at where he just got you, it could be really bad. And so, the best scenes are when it comes together like that. But, if nothing else, Steve should still seem to be heroic and a good guy at all times. And Brian, Brian got that right away. And, they were scenes that when they sent him over to me, I didn't have to, ask for anything because he just, immediately understood that.
No, I hear you, man. And well, like I said, as a reader, that's what excited me about Hail Hydra. And it's funny. I wonder, post Secret Empire, it'll be interesting to see how history remembers this run, Because you're right. I mean, again, Superior Spider-Man, another great example of how dare you kill Peter Parker, and so many heartfelt blogs. Oh my God, my hero is gone, and that's.
But again, you can complain about that stuff, and believe me, I have my moments. Nobody likes to open up their Twitter notifications and get called a Nazi 1,000 times or what have you. That's not fun for anybody. But what you have to keep telling yourself is this is part of the ride. That people you wanted to work on these characters that people really care about and have all this passion for. And, they wouldn't be fans of the character if they didn't want to protect the character from bad things happening to them. But unfortunately, I have a very different role to play in all that. I have to put the characters through bad things, and I have to, I have to give them adversity and conflict. And as much as people believe that they want some kind of safe, easy to work their way through conflict where, the hero is fighting somebody who is unambiguously bad and the outcome is never really in danger. I promise nobody actually wants that. Like that is what everybody says that they want. But it is definitely not what they actually want. You want to believe that the character is beyond saving. You want to believe that something, unspeakably horrible has happened, because, you want to see how these characters survive. You want to see how they climb their way out of it. That is part of the show, and it can be really tough. And when you're at the beginnings of stories, and even when you're in the middle of stories, that resistance can be fierce, but. We have a lot of confidence in where we're going.
Well, and again, it's going to be fun watching Steve using his skills in a devious way that is going to upset some Marvel heroes that, again, are walking into this with nothing but trust, because why wouldn't there be anything but trust? And again, like you said, it's important for Steve to maintain that level of trust. That's what's going to be exciting, and we don't know what's going to happen next. I mean, you're right. It is really hard to do a traditional 60s or 70s or 80s, like you said, obvious bad guy and stuff, and really find enjoyment in it.
Even back then, back then it was just handled a little differently. Back then Superman covers had crazy things on them. For a reason.
Yeah, people just need to, if they don't remember, there's a blog called Superman is a Dick. And oh God, the late Silver Age and Bronze Age and stuff, it's, Superman, you're killing Jimmy Olsen.
How many covers of Superman back in those days where, some version of Superman has gone bad and is going to kill us all. They probably did that every other month for a while. What you just have to understand is, the method of delivery has shifted, that stories are bigger and more serialized, but this is always what we've done. It's always what we've done is, to get you to pick it up, the cover and the first few pages, we're always there to tell you, we're always there to horrify you and tell you that this is the worst thing that's ever happened to the character. So even in the days of what we think of as kind of safe storytelling, they were really doing the same thing. It's just, again, a lot more of those stories were self-contained, one-and-done stories, which we do less of now. But, the reality is doing shocking things to the characters is as old as the characters themselves. Who knows who the first person was, but, at least at Marvel, somebody sent Stan Lee a letter saying this would never happen to that character you created. And, ever since then, the fans have had this sense of ownership, and, that these characters kind of belong to them, and they're very protective of them and defensive of them, and they love them, and they mean something to them, that's why they've lasted. You know, why they've stuck around so long. So, but you know, the other reason why they've lasted is because, you know, writer after writer and artist after artist have come in and told stories with them that are in fact compelling and put them through things that, you know, we then tend to remember as kind of the seminal moments.
Let's talk about Sam Wilson because, you know, he's the other, I think, locomotive that's heading down the same track, and eventually, you know, Sam is going to wise up. I will confess to you and the listeners that I'm not as up to speed on my Sam Wilson as I am on my Steve Rogers book. But so yeah, where is he? And I mean, is there anyone in Sam's periphery that is starting to smell that something's wrong with Steve?
No, Sam is still at this point pretty oblivious, you know. I mean, one of Sam's big weak spots is you know, when Steve was still an old man and still himself and everything, you know, they had a falling out, and you know, over the Whisperer and over the leaked Shield intel, and you know, they were kind of at odds with one another, and it got kind of ugly, and you know, so when Steve comes back again, it's one of those examples of sometimes the best way to manipulate somebody is to tell them exactly what they want to hear. And you know, for Sam, he has his old best friend back, and they've made up. And you know, so Sam is more trusting than ever in some ways. Sam certainly does not want to find himself in disagreement with Steve again. And I think, you know, anybody, you know, with close friendships knows what that is, that, you know, you have some kind of falling out and you patch it up, you're going to be extra careful not to fall into that trap again. And, you know, so that's kind of where Sam is on that front, you know, is he's gone to Steve and, you know, asked Steve for advice a few times, and, you know, again, it kind of goes back to that thing of if you can do scenes where Steve says inspiring things that sound like the right answer, and in some cases might even be, but, you know, that dig you into a bigger hole, that's kind of where Sam has found himself, that Steve is actively scheming to break him, you know, and, you know, is you know, kind of actively steering him towards his own demise in some ways. And so for Sam, it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. That he's in the downward part of that arc, and a lot of that stuff really has nothing to do with Steve. You know, you know, Steve might be giving him some small pushes here and there. But, you know, the reality is that Sam is confronted with the same problems that he's been confronted with almost since he became Captain America. Certainly, you know, the entirety of my run has really been about how he will never be accepted by a significant portion of the public, you know, that because of who he is and because of, you know, the fact that he you know, has made his opinions known a little bit more and has been a little bit more of a direct cap in terms of taking stands on things that are important to him. You know, he's kind of been sucked into you know, partisan and media vortex, you know, where everything that he says is manipulated, everything that you know, nothing that he does is ever acceptable. And you know, that is just continuing to have diminishing returns. And on top of that, as a result of our AmeriCop story, you know, Sam is really confronting some things that are directly challenging to an African American wearing the Captain America suit and wielding that shield. And you know, he's having to confront, you know, some ugly parts of our society and who we are, and you know, the AmeriCop story is you know, heavily steeped in allegory, you know, but it's really about you know, a very familiar debate and struggle in our society and in our culture, and you know, he's hitting a wall. He's facing a really significant resistance, and he's got to confront it and decide what he wants to do. Sam has been kind of reluctant and exhausted by this role for some time. There has not been a lot of sunlight for him. It has been a very thankless job in many ways, and it's leading us to a pretty big moment for Sam here coming up over the next couple of issues of his book.
Does that happen before or during Secret?
That will all come to a head right before. That will all and the two stories will connect and will dovetail in a really significant way. But again, my feeling was we've been telling this story with Sam, and I certainly didn't want to see on the back half of our Sam story. I really didn't want to see that suddenly just get co-opted by another story elsewhere. Because Sam certainly deserves his own story here, and for me that was really important and really key, that the two stories can connect and help each other, and you can even see kind of big picture how they fit together, or even just outside of plot, just in terms of the allegories and whatnot. You can see how they're related, but the reality is that Sam's story is really its own thing, but they'll both kind of come to a head at once, and at that point they'll really join narratives.
Okay, and it's been fun comparing Sam's story to when Bucky was Cap, and obviously they are different characters, and they are going to have different results of them being Captain America, and I do think that. I know that there is a portion of the audience that it might be hard for them to, I don't know, the legacy characters in some cases may not work out as well. But Sam is he's been a part of the Captain America story as long as he has. It was a natural conclusion that if Cap couldn't do the job when he's old, that it could be somebody like Sam to take over, and certainly what was happening with Bucky. And also just, I don't know, because there is this decades-long investment in Sam's story. It's never not felt like Sam's story to me, obviously, and I think most readers. And I just think because he's Cap and because he's wearing the suit, a lot of things are happening to him that probably wouldn't have happened to him if he just stayed being the Falcon during this period as well. So, it's fun to see him. I don't mean to say, but like you say, it's. You enjoy seeing these characters put through the grinder and watching Sam's difficulties and stuff. No, it makes for interesting.
Well, look, in terms of the legacy character stuff, for me, Sam is always the most logical choice to succeed Steve. That really, if you looked around, he is the guy that I believe Steve would go to in that situation. Bucky made a lot of sense for Ed's story, and because that run was so interconnected with Bucky as a character, and also, I think, the stuff that you got to explore with Bucky as the character was really fantastic. But for me, Sam strikes me as always being kind of the most likely candidate. And obviously this wasn't my idea. Rick Remender, kind of saw this through and made it happen and did the first arc with the character. And when I came in, that foundation was already laid, and all that stuff was already in place. And for me, I just kind of came in and obviously we were, in the middle of the Obama era, and, I looked at it and just said, this is an African-American as Captain America. Not just an African-American, but an African-American from Harlem who was a social worker and a community organizer. He was, he'd been active politically, he'd run for office, considered running for office. He had taken some pretty direct stands. A lot of his early issues, he is, very outspoken, certainly doesn't hold his views back. And so, I said, if that guy became Captain America, a lot of people would lose their minds overnight. That would not be something that they would be cheering. And even if they were right at the beginning, as he took sides and, as he did things, that goodwill would vanish very quickly. And, if this is all sounding familiar, and then, from there, the media would very quickly, realize that there were, clicks to be had and headlines to be made, out of, this guy stepping in it. And, the resistance to this guy. And, to me, that was the story. And on my end, I grew up with the Grunwald run and, had always been an admirer of that run and of the book during that time. And, I had, looked at Ed's run and looked at Rick's run, and they were both really fantastic. And Ed had done such an amazing job of kind of reconnecting the book to that Steranko vibe, and really steeping it in spy stories. And then Rick had come in and done some really cool stuff, especially with Dimension Z, and kind of an homage to the Kirby run, and kind of doing a sci-fi story. And I just looked at it and was like, it's been a long time since we had a Cap run that was, topical, that had kind of those Grunwald and Englehart villains, where they were kind of taking something from the newspapers, and adding supervillainy, and throwing them in the book. And I was like, we should reconnect with that part of the character. That it's fun when Flag Smasher shows up, or the Superior shows up, or the Watchdogs show up, and you can kind of see, this is who these characters are allegories for. But conveniently within the story, they're always trying to attack someone, or they are trying to take over the world. So you're never really forcing Captain America into a place where he has to give a diatribe on their views necessarily. Sam just gets to say, like, I hear what you're saying about border security, but don't kidnap people. And that was kind of the magic of the Grunwald run. Always was that you didn't have to have Cap, soapboxing all the time, because you could just have, and when you did, it could be about, more big picture things. Instead you just got violence is never okay, kind of answer. And so I wanted to, reconnect with that formula a little bit. And what I learned is that formula in an age of Twitter and social media, I had never really intended for the book to become performance art. It's a really funny thing when, your whole run is about, Sam comes out and says some stuff, and then, the media kind of take it and, brutalize things out of context. And, Sam can never really respond to that. So it's kind of a funny thing when a couple of panels from your book get grabbed and they, go viral all over the social medias and whatnot. And it's like, Nick Spencer is saying that Captain America hates, whatever my political position is. And you're like, well, no, if you read the book, he doesn't really say anything about your political position either way. he says don't kidnap people or don't throw grenades or don't bomb things, and but that's kind of the age that we live in. Is it's advantageous for the folks who do that kind of thing to do it because they get a lot of attention and they get to like stir things up a little and generate a little controversy. But it's really funny to me how over the course of the run we've had villains who are kind of allegories maybe for right-wingish things, and we've had characters who are allegories for left-wingish things, and everybody is literally convinced that the book is out to get them. And it's really funny because you're just like, well, I did this to the other side of your argument, and you didn't really mind when I did that. I didn't hear from you then. But again, such is the world that we live in. But it's been fun for me. It's been, like I said, it's kind of been fun to get a Cap book back to that kind of brighter colors.
Sorry, bud.
No worries.
I was looking up Thunderbolts.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Sorry. And it hit, of course, the page where the video came on, so go ahead. But it's been fun to get back to those villains, to like kind of revisit a lot of that Grimwald library and bring in characters like U.S. Agent and the AmeriCops and bring them kind of back into the book has been great for me as somebody who again kind of grew up loving that stuff. Well, and I can appreciate that. Like I said, I think both books have an interesting point of view, and as you say, things are going to start to come to a head with Secret Empire now. When we should look at some of the other players, obviously on the Steve Rogers side. Red Skull, now Red Skull has the powers of Professor Xavier.
He does,
and how aware is he that Steve is kind of doing all this stuff behind his back? Because certainly this was all to be in service of the Red Skull and his vision of Hydra, and then we learned that actually Steve's real mission is to replace the Red Skull and be the real leader of Hydra and everything, and that he's not fit. He feels the Red Skull's not fit to run Hydra.
Yeah, I mean, and that was kind of the plan from the start. It's to me, no matter who Steve is or how his reality has been altered and whatever different background he's had or whatever has happened to him, it's very hard to see how a person like Steve can ever be compatible with the Red Skull. That's part of the brilliance of the two characters, is that they're great opposites. And so even when you make Steve Hydra, Steve is going to be the thousands-year-old version of Hydra, is like an old order seeking world conquest and believing in peace through strength and a lot of horrible things will come with that, but it's still going to be a very different conception than the Red Skulls, who is generally interested in glorification of himself and brutal violence towards anybody that he can get away with it towards. That's kind of what makes the Skull tick. He's kind of the Marvel villain with no redeemable qualities. He's the one that you can just always depict as truly awful with no sympathetic motivations or anything in play. So from the start, I kind of knew that Steve and the Skull would be incompatible, and that Steve would have to be kind of working against him. But the big challenge has obviously been that the Red Skull currently possesses the brain of Charles Xavier, and that greatly limits the action that Steve can take against him. But we're coming to a head. So if Steve wants to see his plan realized and wants to get done what he wants to get done and wants to restore Hydra, then he's going to have to deal with that.
And two other villains are now wise to the fact that Steve is working for Hydra, Taskmaster and is it Aaron O'Grady?
It's
the Black
Eric O'Grady, the Black Ant. One of my favorites. A little trivia on this. I had really wanted to do an arc of Ant-Man that would have involved Taskmaster and Black Ant in Bagalia.
Oh, cool!
And I didn't get to do that just because the schedule. I had to wrap up Ant-Man, and
sure.
it was a thing where I was kind of coming to a natural end of that story, and it just didn't make a lot of sense to tack on 2 or 3 more issues just to do it. But we call Taskmaster the Sheriff of Bagalia all through our Cap story, and that's like a hat tip to the Ant-Man story that I never got to write. But Ant-Man, Black Ant has always been a character I've been really fond of, and he's great with Taskmaster. They make a great pair, and they're kind of our Rosencrantz and Guildenstern moving forward. That they're that they kind of get to remark, that they kind of get to be those guys in all this, and we've got some fun moments coming up, with them. But as you see at the end of 11, they get themselves snatched up by the new Madam Hydra, who is Eliza Sinclair, and so they're in a bit of trouble at the moment. But they're cagey, clever guys, and I'm sure they'll figure something out. I like the idea of 2 characters that kind of idiotic being the ones to stumble on this. Taskmaster can actually be a really effective, really capable villain, and I've written him that way too. But part of the fun of him is that you never know which version you're going to get. And that sometimes he's a clown and sometimes he's a killer, and that kind of works to his advantage a lot. And I like the idea of these 2 kind of working class bad guys being the ones to stumble on the biggest secret in the Marvel Universe and immediately trying to get rich off of it and having it blow up in their faces. That rang really true to me for those guys.
Yeah, that was great when Aaron O'Grady's like, Taskmaster's just like, what does this mean? It's like, it means we're going to get rich.
Exactly. I mean, that's the first thing that they would think. They would immediately just be like, well, how can we make a quick buck off this? And I guarantee you, no matter what they would have, if it had all worked out for them, no matter what they would have gotten for it, they would have gotten ripped off because, that's that guy, right? The guys that, sell their invention for $1 million and watch it go on to make tens of billions.
And familiar territory for you because it's kind of that superior foes of Spider-Man kind of thing where these guys best laid plans and how are they going to go wrong for them? So
Taskmaster and Black Ant are very much kind of in that same corner of character.
Very cool. No, that's great. Okay, so as you say, we'll learn more about Alistair Sinclair. Is that her name? Eliza Sinclair. Excuse me, Eliza Sinclair. We'll learn more about her in 13 and 14 moving forward.
13 and 14 have a lot of Zemo and a lot of Madam Hydra. Cool. We're going to be spending a lot of time on their parts of the story here over the next 2 because they're going to be big players. If you've seen the Secret Empire covers, they're on the cover for the Free Comic Book Day. So they're going to be a big deal going forward.
What else? What other books? I mean, I know that there have been interludes in Thunderbolts and Uncanny Avengers and Deadpool. Are there any other books leading up to Secret Empire that we should be paying attention to?
Those are the big ones. If you're reading Thunderbolts, you'll definitely be getting some good stuff that'll really connect up in a major way. And obviously, Thunderbolts kind of came out of Avengers Standoff and has heavily involved Bucky and Kobik. And obviously Zemo is going to be very interested in his old Thunderbolts crew. So that's all kind of on a definite collision course. So the stuff that they're doing, in particular the stuff that they're doing right now here in this 10th anniversary arc and all that, that's definitely 10th anniversary or 20th. I can't quite.
Probably 20.
It's 20, right? It's got to be 20.
I think it's 20. It's got to be.
Sure it's 20.
But yeah.
But,
no, and I mean, and they've come in and out, so it's fair to forget.
No, exactly. That story is definitely going to come on a collision course. Uncanny Avengers is definitely in the stuff that they're doing right now with the Red Skull. It's not going to seem like an overt connection right away, but then by the time you get to the end, spoiler, you'll definitely see that the stories are tightly connected and help each other. So Uncanny Avengers is definitely one to check out. And then Deadpool is doing a great run-up story and did some great stuff with Phil Coulson. Maybe spotting something not quite right with Steve. So it's an interesting kind of position to put Wade in because he obviously idolizes Cap, and Cap gave him a chance to be an Avenger and all that. So he's a great character to kind of come at this from a different angle. So and again that will feed into Secret Empire as well.
Very cool. So Free Comic Book Day. Is it a Steve Rogers Captain America book, or is that Secret Empire?
Secret Empire.
That's zero.
Secret
right?
Empire is 0. The 16th issue of Cap, which is kind of the end of the road to Secret Empire, and the 0 issue of Secret Empire will both come out on the same day. I believe it's towards the end of April. It's I think the 3rd week of April. Then. Secret Empire #1 will come out the first week of May, and that weekend, the Free Comic Book Day will come out. So you can go into the shop on Free Comic Book Day. The 0 will be there. The first issue will be there. Your Free Comic Book Day issue will be there, and all of the run up in Steve Cap will all be there. So you can really, come in that week fresh, give the story a shot. I like how it's all laid out, we shipped 3 issues of Secret Empire in May, which I'm really happy about because while it's, very trying on everybody from a production standpoint, you're going to get hit with a lot of story very quickly, and it's a big story. Like the scale of this thing is pretty unreal, and I think having so many issues come out in such short order will really help. It'll really help you get immersed into it, and it's the kind of story that really demands it. So I'm pretty happy about it. I definitely would prefer it, over the first issue coming out in May and the second issue coming out in June or whatever. This will be a really good way to get you all in. This touches a lot of corners of the Marvel Universe, and so it takes us a little time to kind of go through all of them and touch base with all of them and kind of lay that foundation. And the first 3 issues, conveniently, are kind of the issues that will do that.
So 8 issues total, or 6 issues total?
9 issues total, plus the 0 and the Free Comic Book Day. So I mean, that's monster.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, honestly, because I really felt like the Clone Conspiracy only being 5 issues, and the explanation that that's the action movie cut, and you're getting more in Amazing Spider-Man. I got it, and I don't know how they're going to ultimately trade it, but it just seemed to me that. I'm for a story taking, 10 issues or a maxi series, even 12. And I'm glad that it is on an accelerated release so that we get it faster. But I want these stories to have the room to breathe because just like in Clone Conspiracy, there are going to be some confrontations and conversations, I imagine, in Secret Empire that are going to be big character moments.
Well,
for everyone.
I would say a couple things to that. Yeah, you are going to get on this one the full Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings treatment here. This is loads of these issues went way over on page count. So you're getting a lot of extra pages. Without the price actually going up.
I was going to ask that too. It's going to stay $3.99.
I believe the first one is $4.99, but I mean it's over 40 pages. So I mean it's a monster. So you're paying $2.50 for 20 pages there. So it's
sure.
It's definitely a good deal. So the issues are packed. The panel count's packed. Then we do have the Steve Rogers cat book and the Sam Wilson cat book will also be connecting to the story very tightly. I kind of compare it to Infinity, where there was the main series, but then there was Avengers and New Avengers, which were, very nearly as integral. You can opt to just read the event, and you'll be fine. You'll be able to follow. But my highest recommendation is to read, at least the Steve and Sam books, because we really got to flesh some good stuff out in those, and especially as we go on, those get to be closer and closer to really integral. Like the last couple of those, it would be a real shame to see people miss them. And we'll have the thing in the back, I'm sure, to kind of help what to read and everything like that, and the proper order of everything. But it is really nobody's going to think that the story has been condensed or abbreviated. The kind of rapid timeline of it really just came from, I personally was of a strong belief. We figured out pretty early on that it was not going to be a single artist involved. That it's been tried a lot, and the reality is it's just so demanding on the artist. You run into delays because they've got to do, 8-9 issues in a row. Things happen in people's lives.
Sure.
If people don't understand how work intensive and time intensive drawing a comic is, it's an incredibly strenuous job. The deadlines are brutal, and the reality is, unless you get started, literally, a year plus in advance, that you're asking an awful lot of any artist. And so, we figured out really early on that especially with this being me and, my tendency to add in extra pages and to need stuff, that it was just not a realistic thing. And so from there, it really became, well, in some ways I prefer having, 3 or 4 artists involved than 2. That, to me, the transitions become a little more natural if you just are kind of accepting that, from issue to issue, there's a change up here. Where when it goes off the rails typically is when you get to like issue 7 and it's been the same person drawing, and then all of a sudden halfway through it's somebody else drawing. And that's when you run into trouble. In my experience, that if you go into it with a plan, you can make it work to your advantage. And if you're writing to those artists from the start and you're understanding that, who's drawing 1 is different from who's drawing 2, that can affect how you end and begin those issues. So, we made it really easy on ourselves. We said, there's going to be 4 artists involved in this thing.
Name of
of course. It's Steve McNiven, which is a huge deal for me. Then Andrea Sorrentino is going to come in.
Terrific.
And oh my God, he's the person that I've seen like the most pages from because he's a pretty fast guy, and they are just absolutely gorgeous. And then Daniel Acuna, my partner on Sam Wilson Captain America, is doing the 0 issue and might be back for more. Who can say? I've gotten to work with Daniel for a couple of years now, and he's just absolutely incredible. And Lanil Yu, who again is one of my all-time favorite artists, and so it was a real wish list for me. I got exactly who I wanted, and the list is even better than I'd hoped for. And I'm seeing pages from everybody, and the book is just absolutely beautiful. It definitely when you start getting the stuff in, and you're dealing with that many artists at that caliber, you're like, oh, my job is easier. Then I realized, that a lot of the work is being done by these guys, and they're carrying me pretty far, and so I feel really good about the package, and the other part of that though was I'm kind of the belief that summer events should come out in the summer. And they kind of benefit if you can do them on the accelerated timeline, and you can do them with multiple artists. You really should, because these stories tend to happen in such a way that when people start them, they're really into them. But the nature of event-style storytelling, where you're trying to tell stories of that scope and scale, mean that if there's long gaps between the issues and things like that, it can be really hard on the audience to stay that invested. And so.
Well, if I may, real fast, I think the audience is well aware that real life will happen and stuff. And the real question, frankly, from a fan standpoint, is what took you guys so long, meaning the publishers, to accommodate and have these multiple artists? Because the argument that, yes, but it looks so much better when it's the same artist through and through, hey, of course it could. But, again, it's been pretty obvious for the last couple of years that real life is just intervenes, and there's not much you can do about it. And instead, delays, and unfortunately, it takes the heart out of the story. It takes the surprise out of the event, because the fallout of the new storylines and new books that come out of these events are out before obviously it just happened with Civil War. Everybody knows it. And again, hey, man, Dave Marquez is a great guy, and I don't think anyone personally blames him and understands. They had a baby and all this stuff happened. But that's the thing, and frankly, look, if you're going to be on this breakneck pace of, well, this event's going to happen, and it's going to happen in this compressed time, and these books are going to come out of it, well, you got two choices. You either delay the introduction of these new books until the event is done, and maybe financially that's not feasible. Well, the other solution is then, bite the bullet and accept that if you're on this double and triple shipping of books, get artists that can accommodate that and enough artists. It's not any particular artist. It's the fact that you need enough artists to make that
virtually no artists. Yeah. You could probably count on one hand.
One, Jack Kirby.
It's a really small list of artists that you can ask anything resembling this kind of workload of, and so we just and again these are things that we have the luxury of being able to look at attempts prior and everything in a way that they didn't. So it's a thing where look, I would have greatly preferred, to just have one artist. Feeding four artists is very, very taxing for a writer. But at the same time, it's it's a thing where we had the luxury, I would say, of hindsight, and that we, we were able to make these calls pretty early on because the defense, the argument for a single artist is always kind of the same thing. This is going to sit on a shelf for a very long time as a collection, and you'd love for it to just look exactly the same all throughout. But we have this on all of our books anymore. Like if a book gets collected into an omnibus or whatever, and you've got 20 issues of your Marvel run in there, odds are very strong because of the double shipping and whatnot that there's going to be 3-4 artists involved in that collection. This is just it's kind of a ship that's sailed. I'm very glad that we made the decision. This is hard enough. Doing it the way that we're doing it, but it was important to us. It was important that we could approach the retailers with some confidence and the audience and say we're going to do everything in our power to get this out and get this out as quickly as possible. It's still, like I say, even with because we on the other side, instead of the book wrapping in October and November, we're wrapping in August. So it doesn't totally make it easy for us because we still have a whole thing of just, the artist's second issue is, coming right on the heels of their first in a lot of cases. So, it's still an enormous challenge. And, I'm really grateful. I work with the best editor in comics and Tom Brevoort, and he's been through this, a million times and knows a lot better than me, the production demands of it. And, he's done a phenomenal job, keeping it all running and keeping it together. I don't make it easy. I have a huge advantage in that regard, and we'll see how it goes. But certainly we're doing everything in our power this time to, again, make our summer event occur over the summer. And, it's a really, when you see what the story is, you'll definitely get why we didn't want it to, go to, however long. It's best told, over a shorter stretch.
Yeah, I hear you, man. No, and honestly, like I said, it's a periodical first. It's a monthly or a several times a month magazine before it is collected, and everyone just has to recognize that, and I think having multiple artists will accommodate that kind of schedule better than putting all the pressure on one person. So yeah, I mean, believe me, I hope it does work out because I do see both sides, and I respect the art integrity of having one guy. But again, it's these are the deadlines, and this is what the companies have set up.
Of course,
and that's
it's fine, really difficult. They're really difficult choices to make. I've been in the situation where books that I really care about, and scripts that I felt really strong about, we just had it with The Oath, we got a later start on that than we would have liked. And, Rod Reese came in, did a phenomenal job on his pages, but, it was clear, that there wasn't enough time for him to do the whole thing. I was extremely nervous about it. It was a script that I really loved that I'd been waiting a long time to do. And Tom was, felt really confident that, we could, find some artists that could do a great job on the remaining pages and make it all work and make it all feel cohesive. And sure enough, the book came out, and we got a really phenomenal, really positive response to it. And that I think helped my mindset going into this as well, of just like, you can make these things work if there's enough of a plan, there's enough of a care, put in, it'll be okay. So, everybody's working very hard to make this thing happen the way it's supposed to.
I hear you, man. No, awesome. And truly, like I said, I've been on board since day one. I think this was what I was hoping it would lead to, obviously. And
well, thanks. Yeah.
In terms of this kind of, we're finally going to see the Marvel Universe wake up to the fact that the most trusted band in the Marvel Universe is its greatest enemy.
Yeah, it's for me, it's funny. Look, it's been a very, very long time since, let's be honest, an event book came out, and you didn't hear lots of people on the internet say something along the lines of, "Oh God, another one of these." I'm not oblivious to these things,
Sure.
But I mean, one thing I can say is I was a fan, and back when House of M hit and Civil War hit, and I can remember that same stuff getting said back then. The people back then were like, "Why do we keep doing these events?" And now we look at those stories and we say, well, what were the big Marvel stories of that decade? And sure enough, we mentioned House of M and Civil War and Secret Invasion and stuff like that. Like, that's what we talk about.
Yeah, but in fairness, Nick, they are coming faster.
Absolutely. And I will give my impassioned defense of event comics that long predates me writing one. I have always liked them. I have kind of a soft spot for them because, in my view, if I want to just do a self-contained story that's an island unto itself, I'll go write an Image book. That's that's not a hard choice for me. A huge part of the advantage and thrill of doing Marvel books is the interconnected universe, and not just the interconnected universe, but the opportunity to do those really big stories where where the cast is huge and where you can really shake things up. And to me, I read the original Secret Wars as a kid, and I was all in. To me,
sure.
It's a fantastic way to tell stories. I think in terms of the frequency of events and what have you, I think that it's getting more and more. It's getting to be more and more of a challenge to explain to the audience that this story is a big deal. That this story is one of the ones, that you're hopefully going to look back at, one of the stories that you're going to remember, and the big status quo things are going to happen out of this. I think the key with events is the same thing as the key with team up books, or the same thing with anthologies, or the same thing with weekly books. You know what the secret to all of these things are? The book has to be good. If look, people say that summer blockbusters are bad. If you say if you talk about summer blockbusters broadly, in terms of movies, people will say, oh, it's the lowest common denominator, trash. And then you say, hey, what'd you think about that Avengers movie? Or, you say, hey, what'd you think of The Dark Knight? Or what have you. People are like, I love that movie. I love that movie so much. And of course, lots of summer movies come out every year, that aren't good, that maybe don't strike a chord with the audience. But, the reality is there's no delivery method or, type of story that doesn't work. It really just comes down to whether or not the story congeals. At the end of the day, again, it can be a weekly book, it can be a graphic novel, it can be an anthology, it can be a double feature, it can be, it can be whatever. People like good stories.
Sure.
So, for me, I don't really worry when I see people having big conversations about how they don't like events, because I'm not writing an event. I'm writing a story. The story hits the check marks of an event. I get why we do this story this way. This is not at all a story that you could do in the Captain America books alone, or anything like that and hope to do it any kind of justice. But for me, and the other thing for me is going back to that for a second, just broadly, conversations about delivery methods kind of bore me because I'm just like, none of this stuff matters. It really just comes down to what's on the page. And for me, I have a high level of confidence in this story because it grew organically. This was not something that we like everybody sat down in a room and said, "Oh God, we got to fill a hole in the summer schedule. What are we gonna do?"
Yeah.
And it wasn't me doing an arc of Captain America and somebody coming to me and saying, "Do you think there's a way to make this bigger and do it this way?" When I pitched this, I said, this part should be an event. That this needs to be that, and it was pitched that way at my desk, in an email to Tom, and they were just insane enough to go along with it. So for me, it's kind of like all this external conversation about events or broad sentiment towards this kind of storytelling. That's stuff that I hear it, but it goes in a box of you don't know what I have on the page. And of course, you can never say with 100% certainty that people are going to respond to your story or whatever, but I generally am able to look at my scripts and have a pretty fair. I know when I've written one that's probably going to click, and I know when I've written one that maybe doesn't, and I'm rarely wrong about that. Like I think I have a decent sense for when the stuff is going to go over, and the stuff that we've done so far, and that's in, and the stuff that's getting drawn. I feel really, really good about our story. I really believe in it.
That's great.
It's a thing where I think that event comics are probably one of the easiest things to be cynical about, and I think that there's always a feeling that they're, cash-ins or what have you. I've heard all that stuff both as a fan and a creator for years.
Sure.
I can only tell you that I myself take this story very personally. That it's a story that I care about, and it definitely is not a. Sometimes I've heard from guys when they're like writing one of these things, and it sounds like everybody drew straws. Like you can definitely, and it's easy to understand how that happens because they are so exhausting to work on. The treadmill is just brutal. But I've never lost my joy for this story. Like I get excited while I'm writing it, and I get excited for people to read it. And again, a lot of times when you've lived with ideas for so long, and you finally get to write them, it's a really fulfilling thing. So, I mean, who knows? We could talk, in 6 months, and I could be like, I'm sorry that didn't work out. But from where I sit right now, I sometimes will say stuff like that to other guys in the town. Like I'll just be like, I'm pretty sure this is good. Like I'm pretty sure this isn't a massive disaster or anything.
I get you, man.
So we'll see.
No, I understand, and honestly, that was just the macro view of how events have been happening and how they've turned out. And honestly, as a reader of the Steve Rogers book since day one, I think you have been very careful at how you're doing the story, and I think it's I think it's very, like you said, organically heading to this culmination. And I think every step along the way.
And the other thing to keep in mind is events go pretty broad in terms of audience penetration. That they reach a lot of folks that just they don't come into the shop every Wednesday. Like, they're not hardcore readers. They're kind of casual. They pick it up from time to time. And what you find in looking at like the initial responses and stuff, is you start hearing from all of those folks. Like you start hearing from folks who like they get, when Marvel announces an event, they get really genuinely excited. And sometimes, within like, people who are talking about, thinking about comics every day, there's a little more fatigue. But the folks who come into shops on Free Comic Book Day, look, there's a reason why Marvel does these things right around that time.
Sure.
Because a lot of the folks who come in, to them, that's the really exciting, good stuff that they want to check out, and
of course,
it's another audience, and there are a lot of them. So, I'm kind of interested and excited to see how they respond to it too.
I hear you, man. No, and agreed. And they should be hit in the face with, wait a minute, what's going on? Oh, I want to read this because, like you said, it goes back to the compelling covers, and a lot of big events will have that kind of, what the hell's going on? I want to see this, and I want to read more. So we can check back if you want at the beginning of the event.
Absolutely.
However it works, but I
feel like once we get through, once the first issue and the Free Comic Book Day and the Zero are out, we're definitely going to want to talk again because there are things that happen in those issues that we'll just say the internet is not done with me yet. Like I have not yet. I still have just this tiny shred of audience goodwill, and I'm desperate to spend that capital. There are going to be a lot of paragraphs written about the things that we do in Steve in that last issue of Steve before it, the Zero, the One, the Free Comic Book. They are all. We hit you really hard out of the gate. So, yeah, man, I'm excited. I'm really excited.
Well, I hope that there are enough Nick Fury secret hideouts that haven't been found yet that you can hide in when the internet comes to attack.
Absolutely. Keep me in your prayers.
And as always, a pleasure.
Hey,
thank you.
Always.
And yeah, man, we'll check it. And seriously, man, I know I said this last time too. We got to talk about the fix because I really, so we really have to do a fix conversation.
Definitely. Maybe next time we can carve out a little time and talk about it a little. But we just
or a separate podcast.
Yeah, I would love that. I would love that. The book is my baby. We're having a great time working on Steve. Steve Lieber is just, one of the most gifted storytellers in comics, and we just wrapped our second arc, and the trade and the start of the third arc are hitting here in April. So,
okay, cool.
Things are starting to roll downhill, so that's going to be fun.
All right, well, let's maybe end of March or something like that before the next dark starts or something like that. Maybe that's the time to do it. So, okay, beautiful. Thank you, Nick Spencer. Thank you for the Fun Cap and Sam stories that you're doing. And also, of course, the fix, and I look forward to you angering more people in the months ahead.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, man.
That's Nick Spencer. I'm going to do my best to keep tabs on Secret Empire as the event unfolds, and we'll have Nick back to talk about this. Like I said, I'm really excited for this event. I think it's a great opportunity to show Captain America at his cunning best in a way that we've never seen before. We've seen him take down the villains. What happens when he's the villain? Sounds like a great story. Today's Word Balloon was brought to you by ECCFrames.com. Great way to preserve, protect, and display your favorite collectibles. Go to their website, ECCFrames.com. Enter Word Balloon in the promo code. You'll receive an additional discount. And I'm telling you, they do a great job preserving and displaying your favorite collectibles. ECCFrames.com. Word Balloon is also brought to you by InStock Trades at InStockTrades.com, where you can find great collections like the Adventures Initiative Complete Collection, Trade Paperback Volume 1, Dan Slott, Chris Gage, many artists, including Jimmy Chung. It was a great thing that came out during Secret Invasion, and it was a new initiative to recruit new heroes and get them involved in the Avengers. Lots of great stories in there. 42% off, just $20.29. You can get the DC Bombshells trade paperback volume 3, Uprising, Marguerite Bennett's wonderful story with Mirka and Dolfo and Laura Braga on art chores. It is 42% off, $11.59. World War II from a different point of view in DC's Bombshells. You get Wolverine versus the Marvel Universe, a great collection of stories that, man, I'm just looking at some of these things. We're talking about Captain America Annual number 8, going back to Daredevil number 249, Spider-Man versus Wolverine number 1, Incredible Hulk 340, Wolverine versus Thor, the 3-issue miniseries, the Marvel Universe versus Wolverine 1 through 4, and lots more. This collection is 42% off, just $20.29. From Valiant, Wrath of the Eternal Warrior, Volume 3, Deal with the Devil. Robert Venditti and Robert Gill and Michael Spicer present this volume, 30% off, $10.49. Some of the great deals waiting for you at InStockTrades.com. Thanks again for listening to today's Word Balloon. I am off to Salt Lake City for FanX. If you are in the area and attending the con, I hope you'll give me the chance to say hello to you and thank you personally for your support on Word Balloon. Thank you very much. And thank you to my League of Word Balloon listeners and their continued support of Word Balloon. Don't forget, if you'd like to subscribe to Word Balloon, you can do that via patreon.com/wordballoon. Until next time, thanks a lot for listening. Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions, copyright 2017.